The Appalachian Mountains are the oldest mountain range in North America, stretching 1,864 miles from Canada to Alabama. Millions of tourists walk its trails every year, admiring the majestic views and pristine forests. Most return home with photographs and memories, but some never return at all. On the 3rd of November 2023, experienced hiker Sarah Kowalski set out on a familiar route and disappeared, leaving behind only her backpack on an inaccessible rock. On the 15th of September 2024, biologist James McNeil set out to study bears in the infamous Bennington Triangle and disappeared for 31 days, returning with no memory of what had happened. On the 22nd of April 2013, student Olivia Hart walked 65 feet away from her friends to take a photo and disappeared in 30 seconds in front of witnesses. 3 different people, 3 different places, 3 stories united by one thing. The mountains took them, and not all of them came back alive. These are not urban legends or fabrications. These are real cases recorded by search and rescue services, documented by detectives, and mourned by families. Cases that make you wonder, how well do we know the wilderness we consider safe? And what happens to people when they cross the invisible line between civilization and the primeval wilderness? On the 22nd of April 2013, 19-year-old student Olivia Hart set out on a hike along one of the most popular trails in Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee. The 5.5-mile Alum Cave Trail welcomes hundreds of hikers every day, is well marked, and is considered relatively safe. No one could have imagined that this ordinary spring day would end in tragedy, shocking the local community and leaving many questions unanswered. Olivia was a sophomore at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, studying environmental science. She was an active, athletic girl who enjoyed photography and often spent her weekends hiking in the surrounding mountains. That Monday, taking advantage of spring break, she organized a hike with 3 college friends: Brandon Cole, 20, Ashley Dixon, 19, and Mark Thompson, 21. The group registered at the park entrance at 8:15 a.m. Ranger Daniel Wilson, who checked them in, later recalled that all 4 were in good spirits, had the appropriate equipment, and had experience with day hikes. The weather was perfect, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny, with excellent visibility. The group began their ascent around 9 a.m., planning to reach the Inspiration Point overlook, located at an elevation of 4,600 feet, and then return before sunset. According to her friend's testimony, the first half of the hike went smoothly. They stopped to take photos, snacked along the way, and reached the lookout point at around 1:50 p.m. There were several other groups of tourists at Inspiration Point, which is normal for this popular spot. Olivia's friends decided to take a lunch break. Brandon Cole described the moment of her disappearance to detectives as follows: "We were sitting on a bench, taking out our sandwiches. Olivia said she wanted to take a photo of the valley from a different angle. She took her phone and walked about 100 feet to our left, to the edge of the observation deck where there were fewer people." Ashley Dixon added, "I saw her standing there, raising her phone, taking a few pictures. Then I turned away to get water from my backpack. Maybe half a minute passed. We heard a sound, not a scream, more like a surprised exclamation. When I turned around, Olivia was gone." All 3 friends immediately ran to where Olivia had been standing. Her phone was lying on the ground. Mark Thompson was the first to notice that 10 feet from the edge of the clearing, there was a steep slope covered with thick bushes and trees. "We immediately realized that she could have slipped and fallen. The edge is steep there, and below it there is a very steep descent of 65 feet, he later pointed out. Her friends began calling out to Olivia and climbed down a few feet down the slope, trying to see or hear her. Brandon immediately called the park's rescue service. The time was 1:59 p.m. No more than 2 or 3 minutes had passed since Olivia's disappearance. The first group of rangers arrived on the scene 18 minutes later. Captain Robert Jackson, the park's search and rescue coordinator, immediately assessed the situation. The steep slope below the observation deck was covered with dense vegetation, with protruding rocks and deep crevices. This is a scenario we've seen before. A person gets too close to the edge, loses their balance, and falls. The slope is so steep that you can slide down a considerable distance, he explained to reporters the next day. By 3 p.m., 24 rescuers, including canine teams, were working at the site. The dogs picked up Olivia's phone signal and pointed down the slope, confirming the fall hypothesis. The team of climbers began to methodically comb the hill, checking every crevice and every patch of dense vegetation where the fallen girl could have gotten stuck. By nightfall, the first day of searching had yielded no results. A team remained on duty overnight, periodically calling out Olivia's name on a megaphone and listening for sounds on the slope. Olivia's family, her parents, David and Sandra Hart, and her younger brother Ethan, arrived from Nashville late in the evening. On the morning of the 23rd of April, the search operation was expanded. Teams from neighboring counties, volunteers from local mountaineering clubs, and additional canine units joined the effort. In total, more than 120 people participated in the operation. A helicopter equipped with thermal imaging equipment flew over the area, trying to detect a heat signature. On the second day, the search was expanded to a radius of 1 mile from the point of disappearance. The possibility was considered that Olivia, after waking up after the fall, could have become disoriented and gone in the wrong direction. All trails, streams, caves, and abandoned buildings in the area were checked. On the third day, divers joined the operation to check mountain streams and small bodies of water. Diving instructor Thomas Rivera noted, "The mountain streams here are fast and cold. If a person fell into the water unconscious, the current could have carried the body a considerable distance." Local media actively covered the story. A photo of a smiling Olivia appeared on the front pages of newspapers across the state. The family held a press conference begging anyone who might have seen or heard anything to come forward. A reward of $15,000 was offered. As days turned into weeks, Detective Lisa Carter of the Sevier County Sheriff's Office, assigned as the lead investigator, considered various scenarios. The first and most likely was an accident. Olivia slipped, fell down the slope, was injured, and may have been unconscious or disoriented. However, an extensive search failed to locate her body. The second theory was third-party involvement. Detective Carter checked all the people who were at the observation deck at the time of the disappearance. 14 people from other tour groups were interviewed. All of them stated that they had not noticed anything suspicious. Surveillance cameras at the park entrances were analyzed, but no suspicious individuals or vehicles were identified. The third, unlikely version is voluntary disappearance. However, this hypothesis was quickly rejected. Olivia had no motive to disappear. She was a good student, had close relationships with her family and friends, and had no financial problems or debts. Her bank cards and phone were not used after her disappearance. On the 16th day of the search, the 7th of May, the active phase of the operation was officially concluded. An area of 30 square miles was thoroughly combed by more than 400 volunteers and professionals. Captain Jackson stated, "We did everything we could. Searches of this scale are rare even for national parks. Unfortunately, sometimes nature takes people and does not give them back right away." On the 3rd of June 2013, 42 days after Olivia's disappearance, a couple of tourists from Georgia, Kenneth and Jennifer Morris, were hiking in a remote area of the park 7 miles from the point of disappearance. The route ran along a small stream at an altitude of 6,300 feet. Kenneth Morris noticed something unusual on a flat boulder in the middle of the stream. As he got closer, he realized with horror that it was a body. He immediately called emergency services. By 2 p.m., an investigation team was working at the site. The body was identified as Olivia Hart. She was lying on her back on the boulder, wearing the same clothes she had worn when she left on her hike. Her clothes were relatively clean, although damp from the stream spray. There were no visible injuries consistent with prolonged exposure to the elements. The body was taken to the Sevier County morgue for an autopsy. Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Margaret Lewis conducted a detailed examination. The preliminary report indicated the cause of death as cardiac arrest. Olivia had no external injuries incompatible with life, no fractures of the skull or spine, and no internal bleeding. The most puzzling aspect was the condition of the body. Dr. Lewis noted in her report, The degree of decomposition is inconsistent with the expected time frame of 42 days. The body is in a condition more consistent with recent death. However, she acknowledged that cold mountain water and other environmental factors could have significantly slowed the decomposition process. Toxicological analysis revealed no narcotics, alcohol, or poisons in the body. Analysis of the stomach contents showed remnants of food that Olivia had eaten on the morning of her disappearance. The girl had no known heart disease or pathology that could explain sudden cardiac arrest. Cardiologist Dr. James Warren, who consulted with investigators, explained, "In young people, cardiac arrest can occur due to undiagnosed genetic abnormalities such as long QT syndrome or hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Such cases are rare, but not unprecedented. Extreme stress, hypothermia, exhaustion, all of these could have triggered fatal arrhythmia in a predisposed person." Detective Carter attempted to reconstruct the sequence of events. The most likely scenario: Olivia slipped and fell from the observation deck, slid down a steep slope, and lost consciousness. When she woke up, possibly with a concussion, and disoriented, she started moving in the wrong direction, going deeper into the forest instead of climbing back up to the trail. In a state of shock and disorientation, Olivia could have traveled a considerable distance over several days, feeding on berries and water from streams. Cold nights, exhaustion, and stress weakened her body. At some point, when she reached a stream, she lay down on a boulder and lost consciousness. The combination of hypothermia, exhaustion, and an undiagnosed heart condition led to cardiac arrest. This version explained most of the facts, although it left some questions unanswered. Why didn't the search dogs find her trail? Captain Jackson explained, "If a person walks through water, and there are many streams here, it interrupts the scent trail. Dogs can lose their direction." Olivia Hart's funeral was held on the 12th of June in Nashville. Hundreds of people, family, friends, classmates, strangers moved by her story came to say goodbye. Her ecology professor gave a eulogy in which he spoke of her passion for nature and her dreams of a career as an environmental researcher. The Hart family established the Olivia Hart Scholarship at the University of Tennessee for students studying environmental conservation. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park Administration installed additional warning signs at the Inspiration Point overlook and reinforced fencing in dangerous areas. Olivia Hart's story serves as a reminder that even on popular, well-maintained trails, nature remains an unpredictable force. One wrong step, one moment of inattention, and life can be cut short. The mountains do not forgive mistakes, even the smallest ones. On the 15th of September 2024, 52-year-old biologist James McNeil set out on a scientific expedition to the forest near Glastonbury Mountain in Vermont. This region, known as the Bennington Triangle, had a grim reputation. Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people disappeared without a trace here. McNeil, a black bear population specialist with 30 years of experience, knew about these stories, but treated them as urban legends with no scientific basis. McNeil was contracted by the Vermont Department of Natural Resources to conduct annual monitoring of the black bear population in the Green Mountain National Forest. His task was to fit GPS collars on several individuals, collect hair samples, and conduct a visual assessment of the population's condition. On Saturday morning, the 15th of September, he checked in at the Forest Service checkpoint at 7:45 a.m., reporting his planned route and estimated time of return, 8 p.m. that same day. The last radio contact with base camp was at 11:23 a.m. McNeil informed coordinator Susan Collins that he was moving along the northern slope and planned to check an area where bear activity had previously been recorded. The communication was clear and uninterrupted. No further messages were received from James. By 9 p.m., when McNeil had not made his scheduled communication and had not returned by the control time, Coordinator Collins contacted the Bennington County Sheriff's Office. At 8:30 p.m., the search and rescue service was activated. At 6 a.m. on the 16th of September, a full-scale search operation began. Captain David Harrison of the Vermont Search and Rescue Service led a team of 48 people, including rangers, volunteers, and 3 canine units. A helicopter equipped with thermal imaging equipment was brought in to assist with the operation. The search was complicated by the rugged terrain, dense forests, steep slopes, numerous ravines, and rocky areas. The weather remained stable, 46.4 degrees Fahrenheit at night, 62.6 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, with no precipitation, which gave hope for a successful outcome. On the second day of the search, the 17th of September, the dogs picked up McNeil's trail and led rescuers to a small clearing 2.5 miles from the point of last radio contact. In the clearing, about 60 feet in diameter, they found signs of human presence: trampled grass, the remains of an energy bar, and a broken branch that could have been used as a walking stick. However, McNeil himself was not there. The search dogs were unable to continue the trail beyond the clearing. McNeil had probably changed direction, or the trail had been washed away by the brief rain that had fallen the day before, which local residents reported at around 2 p.m. The team expanded the search radius to 6 miles. By the 5th day of the search, it became clear that McNeil was either seriously injured and unable to signal for help, or had strayed significantly from his intended route. Captain Harrison requested additional resources. Teams from neighboring counties and volunteers from the New England Mountain Rescue Association joined the operation. McNeil's family, his wife Deborah, and 2 adult sons, arrived in Bennington and set up their own coordination point for volunteers. Deborah gave an interview to the local newspaper, the Bennington Banner, in which she described her husband as a highly experienced field researcher who never got lost and always followed safety protocols. On the 8th day of the search, the team surveyed abandoned logging roads and old hunting cabins within a 12.5-mile radius. There were several such semi-abandoned structures in the region, left over from the mid-20th century when logging was active. The search yielded no results. By the 14th day, the active phase of the search was officially over. Captain Harrison said at a press conference, "We combed through 186 square miles of territory. We used all available resources. Unfortunately, Mr. McNeil has not been found. The case is being reclassified as a long-term investigation, but we will continue to respond to any leads." On the 16th of October, 2024, exactly 31 days after his disappearance, Hunter Robert Hansen from Keene, New Hampshire, found James McNeil in a forest 33 miles east of the place where he disappeared. Hansen, who was checking his hunting grounds before the opening of deer season, noticed a man sitting under a fir tree near a forest road. McNeil was alive but severely malnourished. Hansen immediately called an ambulance. James was taken to Elliott Hospital in Manchester, New Hampshire. A medical examination revealed moderate dehydration, a weight loss of 40 pounds, multiple abrasions and scratches on his arms and legs, and signs of hypothermia. Surprisingly, he had no serious injuries that could explain his inability to return on his own. A detective from the Bennington County Sheriff's Office conducted a series of interviews with McNeil at the hospital. The biologist's testimony was fragmentary and at times contradictory, which doctors attributed to the effects of prolonged stress and exhaustion. According to McNeil, on the day of his disappearance, he was following his planned route. He decided to check a remote area where he had previously installed cameras to observe wildlife. Descending a steep slope, he slipped on wet rocks and fell, rolling down several feet. He hit his head on a tree and lost consciousness. When James regained consciousness, several hours later, he estimated, it was already dark. He tried to get up but felt dizzy and nauseous, classic symptoms of a concussion. His radio had been damaged in the fall, and his backpack was stuck between rocks higher up the slope. James spent the night in a small crevice between the rocks, trying to stay warm. The following days became a blur. McNeil described periods of confused consciousness as he wandered through the forest, trying to find a road or a river that might lead him to civilization. He drank water from streams and tried to find edible plants that he knew as a biologist and berries, even though September was already late in the season for them. Several times he found abandoned logging roads, but they were lost in the undergrowth. Neurologist Dr. Christopher Lane, who examined McNeil, explained, "The patient suffered a moderate traumatic brain injury. Such injuries often cause memory impairment, especially in the acute phase. The combination of trauma, exhaustion, dehydration, and stress could have led to periods of disorientation and confusion. This explains why Mr. McNeil was unable to navigate effectively and moved erratically. Several mysteries remain. How did an experienced biologist walk 33 miles through rough terrain while disoriented? Detective O'Connor suggested that McNeil may have been following old logging roads that stretched through the forests of Vermont and New Hampshire, crossing state lines. In his confused state, he could have walked for days without realizing the distance. Why didn't the search parties find him? Captain Harrison explained, "If a person keeps moving, especially in an unexpected direction, it is extremely difficult to find them. We concentrated our search within a 12.5-mile radius, assuming that an injured person could not go further. But if Mr. McNeil continued eastward, he quickly left our search area." James McNeil spent 12 days in the hospital recovering physically. However, the psychological consequences were more profound. He gave up field work and 3 months later resigned from the Department of Conservation to take up a teaching position at a local college. In an interview 6 months after the incident, McNeil said, "I have devoted 30 years to working in the wilderness. I thought I knew the woods, understood the risks, but one mistake, one wrong step, and everything can change in a second. I'm grateful to be alive, but I lost something in those woods, the confidence I need for this job." James McNeil's story added another case to the long list of incidents in the Bennington Triangle. Unlike the 5 people who disappeared in the 1940s and were never found, McNeil survived. His case shows how easily even an experienced specialist can get into trouble in these ancient, unforgiving mountains, where nature does not forgive mistakes. On the 3rd of November 2023, 27-year-old Sarah Kowalski set out on a solo hike along the Blue Ridge Parkway, a route she knew by heart. An experienced hiker and licensed mountain guide, she had spent the last 5 years working in the Great Smoky Mountains region of North Carolina, leading groups on the most challenging trails. That Thursday morning seemed like any other. Nothing foreshadowed the tragedy that would unfold in the days to come. Kowalski checked in at the state park entrance at 7:20 a.m. Ranger Thomas Kincaid, who took her route sheet, later recalled that Kowalski was in good spirits. She reported her plans: a route to the summit of Callaway Peak via the eastern ridge, with an estimated return time of 6 p.m. The weather promised to be ideal, 57.2 degrees Fahrenheit, variable cloudiness, good visibility. Sarah took standard equipment: a backpack with water, snacks, a first aid kit, a GPS navigator, and a cell phone. Her sister Emily, who lives in Raleigh, received a routine text message around noon. "Everything is great, the views are amazing." That was the last word from Sarah. When she did not contact them or return by the check-in time at 9 p.m., her family became concerned. At 10 p.m., an official missing person report was filed with the Avery County Sheriff's Office. At 6 a.m. on the 4th of November, the official search began. A team of 42 people, including park rangers, volunteers from the local search and rescue service, and 3 dog handlers with trained dogs, began combing the area. Captain Michael Jensen, a veteran with 20 years of mountain rescue experience, was appointed to coordinate the operation. The first day of searching yielded no results. The dogs were able to pick up a scent from Sarah's last GPS location, 2 miles from the summit on the main trail, but then lost it at a fork where the trail split in 2 directions. This was strange, but not unprecedented. In the mountains of North Carolina, dense foliage, rocky soil, and frequent rains regularly hamper the work of search dogs. There had been a brief rain shower in the previous 48 hours, which could have washed away the scent trail. Sarah's family arrived at the search site by the evening of the first day. Her father, Robert Kowalski, a former military man, insisted on expanding the search area. Sarah knows these mountains. If she hasn't returned, something has gone wrong. She could have been injured or fallen off a cliff. We need to check the ravines and hard-to-reach areas, he told reporters from a local newspaper. By the 5th day of the search, more than 120 people were involved in the operation. A rescue helicopter joined the search, flying over the area with thermal imaging equipment. Volunteers from neighboring counties joined in combing the forest. Sarah's friends and colleagues organized their own search party of 25 people. other guides, and experienced hikers who knew the region. However, the weather began to deteriorate. Forecasters warned of an approaching cold front. The temperature dropped to 32 degrees Fahrenheit at night. If Sarah were injured and without shelter, her chances of survival were rapidly diminishing with each passing hour. Captain Jensen expanded the search area to a 9-mile radius, including remote areas not usually visited by hikers. On the 6th day, a search dog named Max, a Belgian shepherd with years of experience, found a clue 2.5 miles northwest of the main route. The dog led the guide to a small stream where a torn piece of khaki fabric was found on a rock, the same shade as the jacket Sarah's family said she had worn on the hike. The sample was sent for examination. On the 7th of November, exactly 4 days after the search began, a group of rescue climbers checking hard-to-reach rocky areas made a discovery that turned the investigation upside down. At an altitude of 5,400 feet, at the top of the sheer cliff of Eagle Rock, located 12 miles from Sarah's last known location, her backpack was found. The location immediately raised questions. Eagle Rock is a technical rock formation that requires special climbing equipment, ropes, carabiners, and belay systems. It is not a tourist route. Experienced climbers take 3 to 5 hours to ascend. Sarah did not have any climbing equipment with her, only a standard hiking backpack. How could she have gotten there? The backpack was thoroughly examined on site and then taken to a laboratory. Everything inside was neatly packed: spare clothes, an empty water bottle, energy bars, 2 of the 5 had been eaten, an untouched first aid kit, and a GPS navigator with the last recorded point at 3:42 p.m. on the 3rd of November, 2 miles from where the backpack was found. Sarah's phone was also in the backpack, dead. Her hiking boots were standing next to the backpack. This detail particularly puzzled investigators. The shoes were relatively clean, although they showed signs of wear. Forensic experts noted the absence of significant dirt that would be expected after a 7-mile hike across rough terrain. Detective Laura McGregor of the Avery County Sheriff's Office, assigned as the lead investigator in the case, began to consider various versions of what had happened. The first and most obvious was an accident. Sarah could have strayed from the trail, been injured, and possibly become disoriented. However, this did not explain how her backpack ended up on an inaccessible rock. The second theory was third-party involvement. There had been cases of attacks on lone hikers in the region, albeit rare. Detective McGregor requested information on all violent crimes reported within a 62-mile radius over the past 5 years. The alibis of several individuals who had previously been convicted of crimes against the person and lived in the area were checked. Jason Turner, Sarah's ex-boyfriend, whom she had broken up with 6 months before her disappearance, was questioned. According to him, the breakup was mutual and amicable. At the time of Sarah's disappearance, he was at work in Charlotte, 112 miles from the scene, as confirmed by his colleagues and CCTV footage from his workplace. The third, more disturbing version is that she disappeared voluntarily. Detective McGregor conducted a series of interviews with Sarah's friends, colleagues, and family members. The overall picture was consistent. Sarah loved her job, had a warm relationship with her family, and had no financial problems or debts. Her bank accounts showed no unusual activity in the weeks before her disappearance. However, Sarah's friend, Melissa Chen, mentioned that a month before her disappearance, Sarah had talked about the need for change and being tired of the routine. The discovery of the backpack gave the search a new direction. If Sarah somehow made it to Eagle Rock, she may have descended on the other side of the cliff or continued along the ridge. A group of climbers surveyed all accessible descent routes. Caves and crevices within a 3-mile radius of the backpack's location were checked. On the 9th day of the search, the 10th of November, divers joined the operation to check the deep mountain lake Chris Creek, located a mile from Eagle Rock. The lake, up to 115 feet deep, had a reputation for being dangerous due to cold underwater currents and low visibility. A 4-day search of the bottom yielded no results. Local residents familiar with the region offered their own theories. Longtime resident Henry McDonald, who had lived in these mountains for 63 years, told of abandoned 19th century mines whose entrances were overgrown with forest and difficult to distinguish. Several such mines were discovered and surveyed. In one of them, 4 miles from Eagle Rock, traces of a relatively recent human presence were found: an extinguished campfire and food wrappers. However, analysis showed that the traces had been left several months earlier and were not related to Sarah. By the end of the second week, the Sarah Kowalski case had attracted the attention of the national media. Hundreds of calls came into the hotline. Most turned out to be false leads, people claiming to have seen a woman resembling Sarah in various cities from Atlanta to Washington. Each report was checked, but none were confirmed. Several people admitted to pranking and were fined for providing false information. Social media was filled with speculation. Conspiracy theorists offered theories ranging from alien abduction to secret government experiments. Sarah's family asked the public to focus on the facts and support the official search efforts. By the 21st of November, 18 days after Sarah's disappearance, the active phase of the search operation was officially over. More than 2,000 man-hours, 170 volunteers, and dozens of professional rescuers combed through 149 square miles of territory. No body or additional evidence was found. Captain Jensen said at a press conference, "We have done everything possible and will continue to follow up on any new leads. The case is now being treated as a long-term investigation. Ranger patrols will continue to monitor the area, but a massive search is no longer warranted without new information." Detective McGregor continued to work on the case but admitted, "This is one of the most mysterious cases of my career. It is physically impossible for a person without special equipment to climb that cliff, but the backpack is there. We have ruled out most of the usual scenarios. Only questions remain." Sarah Kowalski is officially listed as missing. Her case remains open in the National Crime Information Center database. The family has organized an annual memorial walk along the Blue Ridge Parkway, trails to raise funds for the region's search and rescue services. Park rangers have installed a small memorial plaque at the registration point where Sarah was last seen. It is engraved with the words, "In memory of Sarah Kowalski, an experienced guide who loved these mountains. Missing since November 3rd, 2023. Sarah's story has become a warning even for experienced hikers. Mountains can be unpredictable. One mistake, one wrong turn, one underestimated danger, and a person can disappear, leaving behind only questions and grieving loved ones." The mountains of America hide secrets that defy explanation. Two people, two completely different stories. One ended in tragedy, the other ended in a return without memory. On the 7th of August, 2013, professional photographer Christina Newell arrived at dawn at the Donald Vista Lookout Point in Sierra Nevada. In this place, 3 people had already disappeared before her. Her car was found locked. Her phone and keys were inside. Christina herself had vanished. 47 days later, only her shoes were found at the edge of a cliff. A professional photographer specializing in landscape photography, Christina planned to capture the sunrise over Donald Reservoir, one of the most picturesque views in California. She could not have known that she would become the 4th person to disappear in this cursed place in the last 8 years. Donald Vista Point is a remote observation deck located at an elevation of 6,900 feet above sea level in the Stanislaus National Forest. A 7.5-mile dirt road leads from Highway 108 to a small parking lot from which a 300-foot trail descends to the viewpoint itself, offering a panoramic view of an emerald reservoir surrounded by granite cliffs and pine forests. The beauty of this place is deceptive. Since 2005, 3 people have disappeared without a trace within a 3-mile radius of the observation deck. On the 23rd of June 2005, 24-year-old Nita Mayo, a student from Sacramento, disappeared. On the 15th of September 2010, 52-year-old Patricia Tolhurst, an experienced hiker from Modesto, did not return from a hike. On the 11th of May 2012, 37-year-old Breck Phelps, a biologist studying the local fauna, disappeared. None of these cases has been solved, No bodies have been found, no clues. Forest Service Ranger Molly Fuller, who has worked in the region for 19 years, admitted in an interview with a local newspaper, "There is no rational explanation for why this particular place. The terrain is difficult, yes, but no more dangerous than dozens of other areas in the Sierra Nevada. People park here and just disappear. It's not normal." Christina left San Francisco after dark. GPS data from her smartphone, later retrieved by investigators from cell phone records, showed that she arrived at the Donald Vista parking lot at 7:12 a.m. Sunrise that day was at 6:40 a.m. But Christina probably got delayed on the way or stopped to take other photos, a common practice for professional landscape photographers. She was alone. According to her loved ones, Christina often preferred to work alone so she wouldn't be distracted and could focus entirely on her photography. Her fiancé, Michael Strand, told detectives that he knew about Christina's plans for that day. She was going to leave early in the morning, spend a few hours there, and be back for lunch. We planned to have lunch together at 1 p.m. She was punctual. When she didn't answer my calls by 2 p.m., I became concerned, he said. At 2:30 p.m., Michael called the Tuolumne County Sheriff's Office to report that his fiancée was not responding to his calls. The officer on duty took down the information but explained that an adult is only considered missing after 24 hours of no contact. Michael insisted on an immediate check, citing a history of disappearances in the area. At 4:45 p.m., Deputy Sheriff Robert McLean arrived at the Donald Vista parking lot. Christina's silver Honda Accord sedan was parked there, the only car at that moment. The car was locked. Looking through the windows, the deputy saw a bag on the driver's seat, a cell phone on the center console, and the car keys in the cup holder. McLean immediately realized that the situation was serious. If Christina had gone to the observation deck, she would have taken her phone with her. The photographer would not have left her keys in the car. The assistant walked along the path to the observation deck, calling Christina's name loudly. There was no answer. There was no one on the deck. There were no signs of human presence, no forgotten items, no trash. Returning to the car, McLean requested permission to open it. By 5:30 p.m., another assistant and ranger, Molly Fuller, were on the scene. The car was opened. Inside, they found Christina's bag with her wallet, documents, and bank cards. The phone was charged to 73%. The last activity was an incoming call from Michael at 12:48 p.m., which went unanswered. The car keys were in the cup holder, as the deputy had seen through the window. What puzzled investigators most was the absence of a camera. Christina's relatives confirmed that she always took her professional Canon 5D Mark III SLR camera and interchangeable lenses with her in a special backpack. Neither the camera nor the backpack were in the car, so she must have taken them with her. But where did she go? By 8 p.m. on August 7th, a team of 12 people was working at the site. Sheriff's deputies, Forest Service rangers, and volunteers from the local search and rescue service. Captain David Morales, the operation coordinator, organized a search of the trail to the observation deck and the surrounding area. Powerful flashlights and thermal imaging equipment were used. The 400-meter trail was thoroughly searched. The ground cover, heavily trampled by thousands of tourists over the years, did not retain clear footprints. It was impossible to determine whether Christina had taken this route. No personal belongings or signs of a struggle were found on the observation deck, which is a large wooden platform with a railing. On the morning of August 8th, dog handlers with 4 search dogs joined the operation. The dogs were given Christina's clothes, provided by her fiancé, to sniff. The dogs' reaction was strange. All 4 animals approached the parked car, sniffed it, then began to move toward the start of the trail. But after 15 to 20 meters, they lost the trail and stopped in confusion. Guide Thomas Erickson, who had been working with search dogs for 22 years, later said, "I've never seen anything like it. Usually a dog either picks up a scent and follows it or doesn't react at all. Here they clearly smelled something, but the trail broke off almost immediately. It was as if the person had vanished into thin air." By the 3rd day of the search, the operation had expanded to a scale rarely seen in this region. 280 people combed the area within a 15-kilometer radius of the parking lot. A California rescue helicopter flew over the area with thermal imaging equipment. Climbers checked steep cliffs and crevices where Christina could have fallen or descended. The terrain was indeed rugged. Captain Morales described it as a vast area with extreme elevation changes, deep canyons, dense vegetation, and many natural hiding places. Pine forests alternated with granite cliffs. Deep ravines covered with shrubs were rugged to access, even for experienced climbers. Several small streams flowed down the slopes into a reservoir. Detective Sarah Bishop of the Tuolumne County Sheriff's Office, assigned as the lead investigator, considered various scenarios. An accident remained the most likely explanation. Christina could have strayed from the trail to find a better angle for her photos, slipped on the steep slope, and fallen into a crevice. However, an extensive search failed to locate her body. The second theory was criminal. Someone could have attacked Christina and kidnapped her, but there were no signs of a struggle in the car. Cameras at the nearest gas station, 22 miles from the scene, only recorded Christina's car passing by at 6:42 a.m. No suspicious vehicles were seen following her or arriving in the Donald Vista area around the same time. The third version, voluntary disappearance, was quickly rejected. Christina was happy in her relationship and was planning her wedding for October. Her photography business was thriving and she had no financial problems. Her friends and colleagues unanimously agreed that she had no reason to disappear. 3 weeks of active searching yielded no results. On the 28th of August, the official search operation was called off. Captain Morales said at a press conference, "We have searched every foot within a 9-mile radius. We have used all available resources. Unfortunately, Miss Newell has not been found. The case remains an active investigation." Christina's family, her parents Robert and Linda Newell and her sister Jennifer, did not give up hope. They organized their own search party of volunteers who continued to check remote areas every weekend. A reward of $50,000 was offered for information leading to Christina's whereabouts. Local media linked Christina's disappearance to the previous 3 cases. Journalists dubbed Donald Vista the cursed lookout. One reporter from the Sacramento Bee wrote, "4 people in 8 years, 4 different circumstances, not a single body, not a single clue. What is going on in these mountains?" On the 23rd of September 2013, precisely 47 days after the disappearance, hiker Jack Harrington from Los Angeles was hiking alone in a remote area 5.5 miles northwest of Donald Vista. The route ran along a high ridge with picturesque views of the valley. At 2:20 p.m., Harrington noticed something bright on a flat granite rock jutting out over the cliff. As he got closer, he discovered a pair of women's hiking boots. The shoes were neatly placed, toes pointing toward the edge of the cliff. The cliff was about 500 feet high, a sheer granite wall descending into a forest-covered canyon. Harrington immediately called the rescue service. By 4 p.m., an investigation team was working at the site. The shoes were photographed in situ, then removed for examination. They were Salomon brand hiking boots, size 38, women's. Inside the insole was a tag with the name K. Newell. Christina signed her belongings, according to her relatives. The shoes were in relatively good condition, considering that they had been lying in the open air for more than 6 weeks. The soles were worn, and there were traces of dirt and vegetation on the upper part. Forensic experts determined that the shoes had been taken off and placed there intentionally, rather than having fallen off or been thrown away. The discovery of the shoes gave the investigation a new direction. A team of climbers descended the cliff face, checking every ledge and crevice. The bottom of the canyon, covered with thick brush and boulders, was combed by teams with dogs. The search continued for 5 days. Christina's body was not found. None of her other belongings were found. No backpack with a camera, no clothes, nothing. Detective Bishop consulted with experts on the behavior of missing persons. Dr. Michael Turner, a psychologist specializing in disappearances, offered several hypotheses. Removing shoes in extreme situations can indicate hypothermia. One of the paradoxical symptoms is that a person feels hot and starts to undress. If Miss Newell spent the night in the mountains without shelter, the temperature could have dropped to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Hypothermia could have led to disorientation and irrational behavior. However, this version did not explain how Christina walked 5.5 miles from the place of her disappearance. Why did she only take off her shoes and place them neatly? Why was her body not found? The Christina Newell case officially remains open. She is listed as missing. Her photos and description are in the National Crime Information Center database. Periodically, reports come in from people claiming to have seen a woman resembling Christina in various cities. All leads are checked, but none have been confirmed. Ranger Molly Fuller resigned a year after Christina's disappearance. In her farewell interview, she said, "I can't work there anymore. 4 people disappeared during my shift. I feel like I let them all down. This place takes people, and we don't know why." The story of Christina Newell remains one of the most mysterious disappearances in the Sierra Nevada. The mountains keep their secrets, and sometimes they are not ready to give them up. On the 2nd of October 2024, 46-year-old geologist Robert Hansen set out on a solo hike in the Seven Lakes area of Olympic National Park, Washington. For a man with 11 years of experience on the Olympic Mountain Rescue Search and Rescue Team, this route was familiar down to the smallest detail. Robert had hiked it more than 50 times. No one could have imagined that the most experienced rescuer would himself become the subject of a large-scale search operation and return with a story he could not remember. Robert had planned a 2-day hike with an overnight stay at Lake Hawk, a picturesque body of water surrounded by dense coniferous forests and granite cliffs. He registered at the park entrance in the morning, informing the rangers of his route and estimated time of return. The weather was typical for October in the Pacific Northwest: variable cloudiness, a temperature of around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and a light breeze. The last text message to his wife, Linda, came in the afternoon. Robert reported that he had set up camp by the lake and everything was going according to plan. Communication in the mountains is unstable, so when Linda didn't receive an evening call, she wasn't worried. Robert often went a day without communication. However, when he did not return home on the 3rd day and missed a check-in call, his colleagues from the rescue service raised the alarm. Captain Stephen Riley, Robert's friend and partner on many operations, personally led the search party. The team found Robert's tent exactly where he had planned, by Lake Hawk. The tent was set up correctly with all the pegs in place. All his equipment was inside: a backpack, spare clothes, food, and a camping stove. The sleeping bag was unzipped from the inside, as if the man had gotten up in the middle of the night. His hiking boots were neatly placed at the entrance to the tent. What immediately alarmed the rescuers was that Robert's GPS tracker, which he always carried with him as an experienced rescuer, was left in the tent. The data downloaded from the device showed an unusual pattern. At 3:17 a.m., the tracker recorded the start of movement northward. Moving at 7 miles per hour is physically extremely difficult for a person in a dark forest at night without lighting on rough terrain. The trail ended after 2.5 miles in an area of dense rainforest. Captain Riley suggested, perhaps the GPS tracker was damaged or malfunctioned. Robert could have woken up at night, left the tent to relieve himself, walked a few dozen feet away, and become disoriented in the dark. This happens even to experienced people. The search operation began immediately. More than 80 people, Robert's colleagues, park rangers, volunteers, combed the area within a 9-mile radius of the camp. Search dogs, a helicopter with thermal imaging equipment, and drones were used. The Olympic Mountains rainforest is one of the densest in the continental United States, with thick undergrowth and numerous fallen trees, which made the search considerably more difficult. The weather was deteriorating. It started to rain, and the temperature dropped to 37.4 degrees Fahrenheit at night. Without warm clothes and equipment left in the tent, Robert's chances of survival were rapidly declining with each passing day. The team worked around the clock, checking every crevice, every ravine, every section of the dense forest. Detective Emily Chen of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office considered an accident to be the most likely scenario. Robert could have fallen, been injured, and lost consciousness. However, the massive search yielded no results. More than 180 square miles of territory were checked. On the 21st of October, 19 days after his disappearance, a group of hunters found Robert in the Bogachiel River Valley, 17 miles from his camp. This was an area that searchers had already checked twice. Robert was sitting at the foot of a large spruce tree, in a state of complete prostration. Hunter Mark Davidson later recounted, "We saw a man sitting motionless. He was looking straight ahead, but it seemed he couldn't see us. We called out to him. No response. Only when we got close did he blink and turn his head. It was clear he was in shock." Robert was immediately taken by helicopter to Harborview Hospital in Seattle. A medical examination revealed severe exhaustion. He had lost 35 pounds. He was moderately dehydrated and had multiple abrasions and scratches on his arms and body, signs of prolonged hypothermia. Surprisingly, his feet were virtually unscathed, even though he was found barefoot. Dr. Alice Martinez, a neurologist who examined Robert, noted, "The patient shows classic signs of dissociative amnesia caused by extreme stress. Blood tests showed abnormally high levels of cortisol and adrenaline, stress hormones. This indicates that the patient's body was in a state of prolonged fight or flight response. This happens in cases of extreme psychological trauma." Robert could remember almost nothing about the 19 days he spent in the forest. His last memory was of sleeping in a tent. The next was of sitting under a tree while strangers approached him. Everything between those moments was a blank. Psychologist Dr. Kenneth Walsh, who specializes in traumatic disorders, explained, "The brain protects itself from unbearable experiences by blocking access to traumatic memories. If Mr. Hansen experienced something that his psyche perceived as a threat to his existence, whether it was an encounter with a predator, a fall, or wandering for days in a state of panic, the brain could erase those memories as a defense mechanism." 3 parallel scratches, each about 14 inches long, were found on Robert's back. Park biologist Jennifer Cole examined the wounds and suggested, "The distance between the scratches is wide. It's not a bear. Their claws leave more clustered marks." Perhaps Robert was climbing over a fallen tree with protruding branches or slipping on a rock. In a state of panic and disorientation, a person can sustain multiple injuries without realizing it. Robert spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering physically. His psychological rehabilitation took much longer. A month after his return, he wrote a letter of resignation from Olympic Mountain Rescue. In his letter to his colleagues, he explained, "I can no longer trust the mountains. I lost something there. Not just my memory, but the part of myself that felt safe in the forest. Please understand my decision." His wife Linda told reporters, "Robert has changed. He doesn't talk about what happened because he doesn't remember, but I see how he flinches at the sound of the wind, how he avoids looking at photos from his hikes. Something happened there, in those woods, something his mind is protecting him from by refusing to remember." The story of Robert Hansen remains one of the most mysterious in the annals of Olympic Mountains search and rescue operations. An experienced rescuer who knew the mountains like his own home spent 19 days in the forest and returned without a single memory. Medical science explains this as traumatic amnesia. But the question remains, what could scare a man who has dedicated his life to saving others in these very mountains so much that his mind prefers to forget everything that happened? 2 stories, 2 outcomes. 1 mystery. Christina Newell never returned. Her shoes were at the edge of the cliff, her car was locked with the keys inside, and her disappearance without a trace became another unsolved mystery of the Sierra Nevada. The ranger who worked in the area quit, saying, "This place takes people, and we don't know why." Robert Hansen survived, but lost 19 days of his life. His memory erased all the events that occurred in the Olympic Mountains. An experienced rescuer who had spent 11 years helping people in the mountains, he never returned to the mountains. "I lost something there, not just my memory, but the part of myself that felt safe in the forest," he wrote to his colleagues. Mountains don't explain. They don't justify themselves. They just exist, ancient, indifferent, keeping secrets that humanity may never unravel. These stories are a reminder that even in our age, in the era of GPS and satellite communications, nature remains a force that we do not fully understand or control. If you know of similar cases or have encountered something inexplicable in the mountains yourself, please share your experiences in the comments. Subscribe to the channel to learn more real-life stories of disappearances that defy logic. Don't forget to turn on notifications. The following story may be even more mysterious. Take care of yourself in the mountains. Nature does not forgive mistakes. They say that mountains hold secrets deep in the Sierra Nevada, where ancient rocks keep silent secrets, and events unfold that will make your blood run cold. Experienced climbers Brandon and Kayla Adams disappear on Forester Pass, leaving their backpacks behind on a lonely boulder. 6-year-old Benjamin Porter vanishes into thin air in an open meadow near Mount Rainier, only to be found alive 16 days later at an altitude inaccessible even to adults. Professor Martin Schultz, a geology legend, disappears on the slopes of Mount Whitney, leaving only his hammer and backpack behind. At the same time, his jacket mysteriously appears hundreds of feet higher up. What are these mountains hiding? What forces are taking people away without a trace? Today you will hear 3 inexplicable stories of missing hikers that defy conventional understanding. On the 23rd of September 2001, Brandon and Kayla Adams, a married couple, set out on a hike along a section of the legendary Pacific Crest Trail, passing through Forester Pass, the highest point of the route at 13,053 feet above sea level. Brandon, 28, and Kayla, 31, were experienced climbers from San Diego who had spent the past 7 years exploring the Sierra Nevada mountains. They met at a climbing club, got married 3 years ago, and made hiking the center of their life together. Brandon worked as an engineer at a technology company, and Kayla taught biology at a high school. Every summer, they took time off work and went on multi-day hikes, documenting their routes in a detailed journal. Their friends knew the couple as mountain enthusiasts who carefully planned each hike, studied maps and weather conditions, and always had a backup plan in case of unforeseen circumstances. Forester Pass is located on the border of Kings Canyon National Park and Sequoia National Park at an altitude of over 13,000 feet, where there is 40% less oxygen than at sea level. It is a harsh place. Steep rock walls on both sides, no vegetation, only bare rocks and granite cliffs. The weather here is unpredictable even in the summer months. By the end of September, temperatures can drop below freezing by evening. The Adams were aware of these risks and prepared accordingly. Their backpacks contained all the necessary equipment: warm clothing, sleeping bags rated to -10 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 days worth of food, a camping stove, a first aid kit, a GPS navigator, flashlights, whistles for signaling distress, and topographic maps. Brandon, who was more experienced in mountaineering, also took basic climbing equipment: a rope, carabiners, and a belay system. They set off early in the morning, around 6 o'clock, with the intention of crossing the pass and descending to the other side before nightfall. The weather was perfect: clear skies, excellent visibility, and moderate winds. The climb to the pass took several hours. By noon, they had reached the summit. In their diary found later, there is an entry made by Kayla. 12:35 p.m. at Forester Pass. Incredible view of the valley. Wind is strong, but the sun is warm. Brandon suggested stopping for lunch and an hour's rest before the descent. Tired, but happy. Temperature around 45 degrees. That was the last entry. Around 5 p.m. that same day, a group of 4 hikers from Oregon, 2 brothers and their wives, climbed Forester Pass from the opposite side. Jack Morrison, a 33-year-old teacher, was the first to notice something strange. Near a large granite boulder about 100 feet from the trail stood 2 hiking backpacks leaning against the rock. There was no one around. The group called out, thinking the backpack owners had stepped away to relieve themselves or take pictures. There was no answer. The echo bounced off the rock walls and died away. Morrison approached the backpacks. They were clearly not abandoned, neatly placed, all zippers closed. One had a tag with the name Brandon Adams on it, the other Kayla Adams. The group began searching for the backpack's owners. The pass was an open space with excellent visibility for several hundred yards. There was nowhere to hide. The rock walls rose almost vertically on both sides. The trail was clearly visible for a mile in every direction. If someone had been descending or ascending, they would have been visible, but there was no one. Morrison and his group spent 40 minutes searching the area, checking the crevices between the boulders, calling out loudly. Silence. It was getting colder, the temperature was dropping, and it was starting to get dark. The group decided to descend to the nearest ranger station and report their findings. The descent took 3.5 hours. By 10 p.m., Morrison had reached the station. The ranger on duty, Thomas Elliott, immediately contacted the Sequoia National Park Coordination Center. Given the altitude and nighttime temperatures, which could drop to 10 degrees Fahrenheit at Forester Pass in late September, every hour was critical. By midnight, a team of 8 rangers and 2 dog handlers with search dogs had been assembled. However, climbing the pass at night was too dangerous. Narrow trails, steep slopes, risk of falling. They decided to wait until dawn. In the morning, the search team began the ascent. By 9 o'clock, they had reached the pass. The backpacks were still in the same place. The rangers conducted an initial inspection of the contents. Inside was all the necessary equipment: warm clothes, sleeping bags, food, partially eaten, wrappers from energy bars, empty cheese packaging, a camping stove, and a GPS navigator. The last recorded GPS point corresponded to the pass location, 12 hours and 42 minutes earlier. After that, the device did not register any movement. The dog handlers released the dogs, 2 trained German shepherds with many years of experience in searching for missing people. The dogs were given clothes from the backpacks to sniff. The dogs' reaction was unusual. Both shepherds approached the backpacks, sniffed them intently, then began circling, whining. After a few minutes, both dogs lay down on the rocks and refused to continue working. Dog handler Marcus Jenkins, who had been working with these dogs for 23 years, was stunned. For the first time in my entire career, both dogs refused to work at the same time, he told the search team captain. The search operation was immediately expanded. By evening, 50 rangers and volunteers were working at the site. The area was divided into sectors. Teams of climbers began checking rock walls, crevices, and hard-to-reach areas. A helicopter flew over the area equipped with thermal imaging equipment. All possible descent routes were checked, both on official trails and in wild places. Brandon's parents, Robert and Mary Adams of San Diego, and Kayla's mother, Barbara Turner, arrived at the search site on the second day. Robert, a 62-year-old retired Marine colonel, tried to remain calm. "My son is an experienced climber. He knows the mountains. He and Kayla were always careful, always followed safety protocols. They had all the necessary equipment," he repeated over and over again. The Tulare County Sheriff's Office investigation team considered several versions of what happened. The first was an accident. Brandon and Kayla may have left their backpacks to explore the area or take pictures of the views. One of them may have slipped, fallen, and pulled the other down with them while trying to help. However, an examination of the edge of the pass revealed no signs of a fall, no broken rocks, no scuff marks on the cliffs, no scraps of clothing. The second theory was that they decided to descend via an unusual route, got lost, or were trapped somewhere in the rugged terrain. The third, criminal version seemed unlikely. At an altitude of over 13,000 feet, other people are rarely encountered, especially at the end of September. Morrison's group was the first to climb the pass after the Adams couple. The search continued for 9 days without significant results. The area within a 10-mile radius of the pass was checked. Climbers descended all possible routes on both sides. Caves, crevices, and ravines were checked. They flew hundreds of square miles by helicopter. More than 300 volunteers participated in the operation. The Adams and Turner families offered a reward of $50,000 for information on the whereabouts of the missing persons. On the 4th of October, 11 days after their disappearance, a group of experienced climbers from Berkeley was making a technical ascent on a remote route at about 11,800 feet, about 1.5 miles south of Forester Pass. The route passed through a narrow gorge between sheer rock walls, a place that required climbing equipment and experience. Michael Stone noticed something bright down in the crevice. After rappelling down, he discovered a woman's body. The body was taken to the Tulare County morgue. The medical examiner identified her as Kayla Adams from her dental records. Kayla was wearing the same clothes she had on the day she disappeared: a light fleece jacket, hiking pants, and a t-shirt. She had no shoes on. An examination of her feet revealed minimal damage, a few minor abrasions and scratches, but nothing serious. The body was found 1,350 feet below Forester Pass. How Kayla got there remained a mystery. Descending into this ravine would have required either climbing equipment and experience or a fall. However, the body showed no injuries typical of a fall from a height. No broken bones, massive bruises, or internal damage. The pathologist determined the cause of death to be hypothermia complicated by dehydration. The medical report noted that Kayla was conscious for at least several days after her disappearance. She moved around and tried to get out. There were abrasions on her hands, indicating attempts to climb the rocks. But the absence of serious injuries in such rugged terrain remained inexplicable. How could an experienced climber descend into a narrow gorge surrounded by sheer walls without equipment or shoes? Why did she take off her boots? Experts in extreme survival offered several hypotheses. Dr. Elizabeth Connor, a mountain medicine specialist at the University of California, explained, "In a state of hypothermia, a person experiences a paradoxical sensation of heat. This is a well-documented phenomenon. Victims of hypothermia often take off their clothes and shoes, thinking they are too hot. This irrational behavior is one of the last signs before losing consciousness." However, this did not explain how Kayla ended up so far from the pass, in a ravine that required technical descent. Mountaineer Robert Hillman, who advised the investigation, suggested, "Perhaps she found a route that we don't know about. There are natural passages and crevasses in the mountains that are not marked on maps. In a state of panic or disorientation, a person may descend a path that seems passable but turns out to be a trap. Easy to descend, but impossible to climb back up." Brandon was not found. The search operation was resumed with redoubled intensity after Kayla's body was discovered. The reasoning was simple. If Kayla ended up in the ravine, Brandon might also be somewhere nearby. Climbers combed through all the crevasses, caves, and hard-to-reach areas within a 3-mile radius of the discovery site. 2 more weeks of intensive searching. Nothing. The family organized a private search expedition. Robert Adams hired a professional search and rescue company specializing in mountain operations. A team of 12 experienced climbers spent another month checking every square foot within a 5-mile radius of Forester Pass. They used drones with cameras, professional thermal imaging equipment, and specially trained dogs. There were no results. By November, snow had covered the high mountain areas of the Sierra Nevada. Further searches were impossible until spring. The Adams family hoped that new clues would emerge after the snow melted. In the spring of 2002, the search resumed. Groups of volunteers, coordinated by park rangers, combed the area again. Brandon was not found. Years passed. The Brandon Adams case remained open. Every summer, groups of tourists passing through Forester Pass received information leaflets with a photo of Brandon and a request to report any findings, clothing, equipment, or any traces of a person. Rangers periodically checked remote areas. Nothing. Mary Adams, Brandon's mother, devoted the rest of her life to searching for her son. She organized a fund to support families of people missing in national parks, lobbied for improvements to search and rescue systems, and advocated for the installation of additional emergency communication stations in remote mountain areas. "I will never stop looking for my son. Somewhere out there in the mountains is the answer. I have to find it," she said in an interview. Barbara Turner, Kayla's mother, buried her daughter in San Diego. The words "she loved the mountains and the mountains took her" are engraved on the tombstone. Barbara never climbed the Sierra Nevada again. "I lost my daughter." Robert and Mary couldn't even bury their son. "I don't know which is worse," she said at the memorial service. The story of Brandon and Kayla Adams has become one of the most mysterious in the annals of California's national parks. 2 experienced climbers, equipped with all the necessary gear, disappeared in broad daylight on an open pass with excellent visibility. One of them was found 1,350 feet below, in a location physically unreachable without equipment. The second has not been found to this day. The Sierra Nevada mountains keep their secrets. What happened to Brandon and Kayla Adams on that September day in 2001? Why did they leave their backpacks behind? How did Kayla end up in a remote ravine with no visible injuries from the fall? Where is Brandon's body? These questions remain unanswered. Nature does not explain. It simply exists, ancient, indifferent, unpredictable. The Porter family from Tacoma, Washington, arrived at Mount Rainier in the second half of August 2018. Parents David and Sarah Porter and their 3 children planned to spend the weekend camping near Paradise Glacier, a picturesque spot at 6,800 feet. It was a family ritual. Every summer they spent a few days in the mountains, introducing their children to nature and camping. Their eldest son, Ethan, was 9, their middle son, Benjamin, was 6, and their youngest daughter, Emily, was 4. The weather was perfect, about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, clear skies, excellent visibility. The family set up camp in an open alpine meadow, where the low grass and lack of trees allowed them to see for more than a mile in all directions. David pitched the tent, while Sarah prepared dinner on the camp stove. Ethan and Benjamin played nearby, running around the meadow and exploring boulders. Emily helped her mother. Around 6 in the evening, Ethan sat down to tie his shoelace, which had come undone. According to him, he was distracted for literally half a minute. When he looked up, Benjamin was not there. Ethan looked around. His brother had disappeared. The boy ran to his parents, shouting, "Where's Ben? I can't see Ben!" David and Sarah immediately rushed to search the area. Panic grew with every passing second. There was nowhere to hide in the open meadow. Visibility was perfect. But Benjamin was nowhere to be found. The family began shouting the boy's name and searching every inch of the camp. Neighboring tourists who had pitched their tents a few hundred feet away heard the cries and joined the search. 10 adults combed the area, checked boulders, and looked into every crevice. Nothing. Benjamin seemed to have vanished into thin air. David made his way to the ranger station 2 miles away and raised the alarm. By 8 p.m., a team of 6 Mount Rainier National Park rangers and 2 dog handlers with German Shepherd search dogs were on the scene. The dogs were given Benjamin's t-shirt to sniff. The animals picked up the scent and led the group up the slope. The trail led across an alpine meadow toward large granite boulders about 300 feet from the camp, closer to the Paradise Glacier. The dogs followed the trail confidently, sniffing the ground. But when they reached the boulders, both shepherds suddenly stopped. They began circling in place, whining and backing away. Dog handler Robert Hendrickson, who had worked with these dogs for 7 years, tried to redirect them, but the animals categorically refused to continue. "I've never seen anything like this," he told search team Captain Stephen Morales. "Usually a dog either follows the trail to the end or gradually loses it. Here it's as if the trail just disappears into thin air." The next day, 2 more dogs were brought in from a neighboring county. The result was the same. Both picked up the trail to the boulders, then refused to go any further. Captain Morales suggested that the boy might have crossed a rocky area or a stream where the scent would not linger. Still, there was no water or particularly rocky terrain nearby that could account for the trail's loss. By nightfall, the temperature had dropped sharply to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, well below freezing. Snow began to fall, even though the Weather Service had not forecast precipitation. A 6-year-old child, dressed in a t-shirt and shorts, could not survive for long in such conditions. Rangers worked through the night with powerful flashlights and thermal imaging equipment, checking every area within a 2-mile radius. In the morning, the search operation was expanded to a scale rarely seen even in a national park. More than 300 volunteers, rangers, search and rescue teams from 5 counties, volunteers, and a National Guard unit combed the area. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras and drones were used, and climbing teams checked hard-to-reach areas near glaciers. Local media covered the story, and hundreds of people came every day to help with the search. Benjamin's parents stayed at the search site. Sarah cried, hugging her younger children. David joined every search group, refusing to rest. "My son is out there somewhere. We have to find him. He couldn't just disappear," he repeated over and over. Friends and relatives organized a fundraiser, offering a $20,000 reward for information leading to the boy's whereabouts. Days turned into a week, then 2. The search continued for 12 days without interruption, but to no avail. Captain Morales said at a press conference, "We have searched every square foot within a 5-mile radius. We have used all available technology and resources. Unfortunately, Benjamin has not been found. We are not giving up the search, but we are switching to patrol mode." The chances of finding the child alive after so many days in the mountains in low temperatures were virtually zero. 16 days after his disappearance, early in the morning, A group of hunters, a father and his two adult sons from Yakima, were climbing a remote route at an altitude of 9,400 feet, almost 2,500 feet above the Porter family's camp. It was a technically challenging section requiring passage across two glaciers and a rocky ridge. The route was not intended for tourists. Only experienced climbers with complete equipment could ascend it. Senior hunter Mark Jenkins noticed something bright near a large boulder. As he got closer, he was astonished to see a little boy sitting on the ground, leaning against the rock. The child was wearing the same t-shirt and shorts, but no shoes. He seemed semi-conscious but alive. Mark immediately called the rescue service, and his sons covered the boy with their jackets. A helicopter arrived 40 minutes later and took Benjamin to Harborview Hospital in Seattle. A medical examination revealed severe exhaustion. The boy had lost about 8 pounds. He was dehydrated and had multiple minor abrasions on his arms and legs. The condition of his feet was surprising. There was virtually no severe damage, only minor scratches and scrapes. Dr. Elizabeth Collins, the pediatrician who examined the boy, later said, "If a child had crossed 2 glaciers and climbed 2,500 feet barefoot, his feet would be in terrible condition, cuts, frostbite, deep wounds. Here we see minimal damage." The parents arrived at the hospital 3 hours later. The reunion was emotional. Sarah cried incessantly as she hugged her son. David stood nearby, holding his wife's shoulder, unable to speak. Benjamin recognized his parents and hugged them, but he was very lethargic and couldn't really explain what had happened. The next day, when the boy's condition had stabilized, child psychologist Jennifer Thomas had a cautious conversation with Benjamin in the presence of his parents. The child said, "I was playing with Ethan. Then I saw a big hairy man behind the rocks. He was waving at me. He was very tall. I went to look. Then I slept for a long time. Then I woke up on the rocks." His parents tried to ask for more details, but Benjamin couldn't or wouldn't add any more. The psychologist explained to the Porters that children in extreme situations often create protective fantasies to cope with stress and fear. The image of a big man could have been his child's mind's way of explaining what happened. Perhaps he saw a shadow, a tree, a boulder, something that frightened him or caught his attention. In a state of hypothermia and stress, perception is distorted. Detective Carol Evans of the Pierce County Sheriff's Office conducted the investigation. How could a 6-year-old child climb 2,500 feet up rugged mountain terrain, cross glaciers, and traverse rocky areas? Expert climbers who consulted on the investigation stated that it was physically impossible for a child of that age to do so without adult assistance. Dr. Michael Ryan, a specialist in child psychology and trauma, offered an explanation. In extreme situations, the human body is capable of incredible things. Adrenaline, survival instinct, and panic can cause a child to climb, crawl, and move with strength and perseverance that would be impossible under normal circumstances. Children are more flexible and lighter, and can squeeze through narrow spaces. Perhaps Benjamin found a route he could climb, moving instinctively. The theory that someone kidnapped or carried the boy was investigated and rejected. At an altitude of 9,400 feet, there were no trails that an adult could have taken with a child. The cameras at the park entrances did not capture any suspicious individuals. All tourists who were in the area on the day of the disappearance were interviewed and checked. How did a 6-year-old boy survive 16 days in the mountains at sub-zero temperatures? How did he climb to a height that would be inaccessible without mountaineering equipment? Medicine and science offer rational explanations: survival instinct, childlike flexibility, luck. But for the Porter family and many who followed the story, what happened remains an inexplicable miracle. Benjamin returned. Not all children who get lost in the mountains come home. The July morning of 2007 was clear and promising. Professor Martin Schultz of Heidelberg University led a group of 8 geology students to the summit of Mount Whitney, the highest point in the continental United States, rising 14,505 feet above sea level. Schultz, 63, was one of Europe's leading experts on plate tectonics and volcanic rocks, the author of 7 books and more than 200 scientific articles. He had come to California for the University of California's summer geology program to share his knowledge with a younger generation of researchers. This trip was not a tourist outing, but a field research project. Schultz planned to collect granite samples from various elevations to analyze the geological history of the Sierra Nevadas formation. His students, young people aged 20 to 24 from the universities of California and Nevada, were excited about the opportunity to work with such a renowned scientist. Among them were Jason Turner, a graduate student from Berkeley, Emily Chen, a senior from Stanford, Michael Rodriguez from the University of California, Los Angeles, and 5 other young geologists. The group began their ascent from the trailhead at Whitney Portal Lake at 4 in the morning to avoid the afternoon thunderstorms that often develop at high altitudes. Schultz was in excellent physical shape for his age. He regularly climbed in the Alps. He considered fieldwork an integral part of geology. Each carried a backpack with food, water, warm clothing, and scientific equipment. Schultz also had his favorite geological hammer, a tool he had used for 30 years, a gift from his research supervisor. The climb went smoothly. The group made regular stops during which the professor explained the geological features of the surrounding rocks, demonstrated how to determine the age of formations, and described the processes that created these majestic mountains millions of years ago. The students wrote down his words, photographed samples, and asked questions. Schultz was in his element, a passionate teacher sharing decades of accumulated knowledge. By noon, the group had reached an altitude of approximately 13,600 feet, walking along a narrow rocky ridge with steep slopes on both sides. Visibility was excellent. You could see for miles in all directions. The trail here was well marked but narrow, only 2 or 3 feet wide in places, with sheer drops on both sides. Schultz walked at the rear of the group, as he usually did on such expeditions. He liked to stop, examine rocks, and take samples without delaying the others. Jason Turner, as the senior student, led the group ahead. The professor lagged behind by about 165 feet, stopping periodically to study fascinating geological formations. The students saw him behind them, bent over the rock outcrop, hammering. Around noon on the second day, something happened that would turn this scientific expedition into a tragedy. The students walking ahead heard a sound, not quite a scream, more like a short exclamation of surprise or alarm. They turned around. Schultz was nowhere to be seen behind the rock ledge. Jason shouted, "Professor Schultz, are you okay?" Silence, only the wind and the echo of his own voice. The group immediately ran back along the trail. After running about 70 yards, they reached the spot where they had last seen the professor. His geological hammer lay on the trail. His backpack stood nearby, neatly placed against a rock. But Schultz himself was gone. The students began shouting his name and searching the surrounding area. To the right of the trail, the slope descended several hundred feet, steep but not sheer, covered with rocks and sparse vegetation. To the left was an almost vertical rock wall. Emily Chen carefully climbed down a few yards down the slope, holding onto rocks, hoping to see the professor below, perhaps fallen and injured. Nothing. Michael Rodriguez checked the trail ahead and behind. Possibly Schultz had somehow passed them or fallen even further behind. Nothing. Panic began to set in. Jason made a decision. 2 students would stay put and continue searching the immediate vicinity. At the same time, the rest would go for help. Jason and Emily stayed behind, continuing to search the area and call out loudly for the professor. The other 6 began a rapid descent to the ranger station. By 6 o'clock in the evening, the Sequoia National Park Rangers arrived on the scene. The captain of the search party organized a systematic search of the area within a half-mile radius of the spot where the hammer and backpack had been found. Megaphones and whistles were used. As darkness fell, powerful searchlights were brought in. The temperature at this altitude dropped to 20 degrees Fahrenheit at night. Without the warm clothes that remained in the backpack, the chances of survival were limited. In the morning, the search operation was expanded. More than 60 people, rangers, volunteers, climbers, combed the slopes of Mount Whitney. A helicopter flew over the area. Dogs tried to pick up the scent, but on a rocky trail at such an altitude, scent trails are practically impossible to detect. All possible places where a person could have fallen or gone were checked. Caves, crevices, areas hidden behind boulders. The students were questioned repeatedly. They all told the same story. They heard a short sound, turned around, saw that the professor was not visible around the bend in the trail, ran back, and found only his equipment. No one saw what happened. No one heard the sounds of a fall, the rumble of stones, the impact on the rocks. Jason described the last moment he saw Schultz. He was standing, leaning over the rock outcrop, working with a hammer. He looked completely normal. We turned away and continued walking. Maybe 2 minutes passed. Then we heard the sound. Schultz's relatives in Germany were notified. His wife Ingrid and his adult daughter Katerina flew to California 3 days later. Ingrid, herself a chemistry professor, tried to remain calm, but it was clear that she was on the verge of a breakdown. Martin knew the mountains. He is careful, attentive. He couldn't just fall. Something happened, she repeated. The search continued for 5 days. The area within a 3-mile radius of the point of disappearance was thoroughly combed. Climbing teams descended all the steep slopes, checking places where he might have fallen. Nothing. Professor Martin Schultz seemed to have vanished into thin air. Then, on the 6th day, a group of tourists from Los Angeles climbing Mount Whitney made a strange discovery. At an altitude of about 14,200 feet, 600 feet above the point where Schultz disappeared, almost at the very summit, a jacket was lying among the rocks. One of the tourists, Rachel Stevens, a nurse, noticed the bright orange jacket and picked it up. The find was immediately reported to the rangers. The students identified the jacket as the professor's. They had seen him put it on that morning before the climb began. Schultz wore a light windbreaker over his t-shirt. The search focused on the area around the summit. Teams methodically checked every area within a mile of where the jacket was found. Nothing else was found. No other clothing, no body, no signs of human presence. How could Professor Schultz have ended up 600 feet above the place where he disappeared? He was walking with the group up the mountain, but he was lagging behind rather than walking ahead. The students did not see him overtake them. There is only one trail in this area. There are no detours. To climb from an altitude of 13,600 feet to 14,200 feet, one must pass by the spot where Jason and Emily, the students, remained at the search site. The investigation team interviewed all the hikers who were on the mountain that day. Several groups climbed to the summit via the same route. No one saw a lone elderly man in an orange jacket walking without a backpack or equipment. At such an altitude, a hiker without a backpack would attract attention. It is unsafe and unusual. Mountain climbing experts were puzzled. One of them, Douglas Craig, a climber with 40 years of experience, explained, "The climb from 13,600 to 14,200 feet is about 1.5 to 2 hours of active climbing for a trained person. But that's on the trail, with stops, with normal equipment." Professor Schultz left his backpack below. He had no water, no food, no warm clothes. Why would he climb higher, leaving all his equipment behind? Some suggested a medical incident, a heart attack, a stroke, sudden disorientation. But then how did his jacket end up so high up? Perhaps Schultz felt ill and in a confused state of mind began to move without realizing what he was doing, climbing upward instead of descending to seek help. But even in such a state, a 600-foot climb up a steep trail is a considerable physical effort. The theory that someone had carried the jacket upstairs was considered, but seemed unlikely. Why would anyone do that? And where was the professor's body? The search continued for another 2 weeks, but to no avail. Schultz's family returned to Germany, devastated. Heidelberg University held a memorial service in honor of the distinguished scholar. His students, who were with him that day, carried the burden of guilt and confusion. "We should have stayed together. We shouldn't have let him fall behind," Jason Turner said at the service. The case of Professor Martin Schultz remains open. Every summer, rangers are instructed to pay attention to any finds on the slopes of Mount Whitney: clothing, equipment, remains. Sometimes the mountains return their missing persons years later, when melting snow or landslides expose what was hidden. Schultz's geological hammer and backpack were returned to his family. Ingrid donated the hammer to the Heidelberg University Museum with a plaque that reads, "The tool of Professor Martin Schultz, researcher, teacher, a man who loved the mountains and gave his life to them." Professor Schultz's story reminds us that mountains do not distinguish between the experienced and the inexperienced, between the young and the old, between tourists and scientists. They exist according to their own laws, indifferent to human plans and intentions. What happened to Martin Schultz on that July day? Why was his jacket found at an altitude he could not have physically reached in that time? These questions remain unanswered, another mystery that Sierra Nevada keeps in its ancient rocks. And while the answers remain hidden in the granite cliffs, we can only guess what happened in those fateful moments and continue to search for the truth. That's all, friends. Give it a thumbs up if you found it interesting. Write your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you later.